So the next point, two more points, and then we're finished with this first part of Freire, is a technical idea of the sub-oppressors. So we have the oppressors, we have the oppressed, but we also have an idea, a concept introduced by Freire called the sub-oppressors. Right? So sub. And the question is, who are the sub-oppressors? Freire says that the sub-oppressors, and all of this is my notes, so I'm paraphrasing this, obviously. Sub-oppressors are oppressed group members engaged in the act of oppression. Oppressed group members, these people, engaged in the act of oppression. So, we can say that this, obviously, this individual represents an entire group, right? So that this individual might be a representation of many oppressed people. So that the oppressor would oppress or dehumanize all of these people. Sub-oppressors would be this. Sub-oppressed groups would be an oppressed group who are oppressing people who would be oppressed by the oppressor. Yeah, Freire is pretty complicated, but I think if you draw the visual, it makes sense. It doesn't sound right, but it is right, right? So, the oppressor oppresses, dehumanizes an entire group. Within that group, there are members of that group that are oppressing those who are already oppressed. So that these people are sort of twofold oppressed, right? You can think of, if you, what is it called? I just slipped my mind. Discrimination, right? If you think of single discrimination, double discrimination, triple discrimination, right? African Americans are discriminated against. Women are discriminated against. African American women are discriminated against twofold. African American woman who is physically disabled is discriminated against threefold. African American women who is a lesbian is discriminated against fourfold, right? So the sub-oppressed group is sort of the discrimination of those within the oppressed group against other oppressed people. So a sub-oppression, right? Sub-oppression. The way that we go about oppression, and I'm going to be a little general in this. He uses the term manhood, but I'm going to sort of reframe that, not because I'm so smart and I'm trying to attempt to reframe Freire, but also, I mean, let's keep it real. Like, all of this is open to interpretation, right? Reader response is a fact. The necessary conflation of the notion of manhood with the oppressor. I don't know if the word manhood, I understand what's being said, but I think the concept is better than manhood, so I'm not going to use the term manhood. What is he saying? In order for me to be recognized is basically what Freire, not basically, this is what Freire is saying. In order for me to attain, it's the belief, it's false, right? But it's the false belief that in order for me to attain recognition, and I won't say recognition of manhood, but recognition of being a human being, recognition of my humanity, I have to emulate the practices of the oppressor. Insofar as I emulate the practices of the oppressor, I become recognized. So as an oppressed group member, I recognize and I emulate the practices of the oppressor, and then I oppress. So that all I understand is oppression, and I'm Jamaican, right? And if you're from Trinidad, or you're from India, or you're from Bahamas, if you are someone who is from colonial, if you're from descendants from colonial times, right, in post-colonial theory, you'll recognize that this sub-oppression is sort of like the self-policing, right? It's the fact that, oh, I'm the type of Jamaican that's a little bit fairer than the next Jamaican, and therefore I'm better. Or I'm the type of, Bahamian that speaks this particular dialect and not this dialect, and therefore I'm better, right? So that I'm oppressing those in my group who are all oppressed. We're all oppressed. But in a sense, I've created this hierarchy wherein I'm better than you for some arbitrary reason, right? Hence the idea of sub-oppression. Very, 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 very important concept. We'll come back to sub-oppression later. Not in this series, but in another series. The way that sub-oppression is done is through this act, right? So this group is attempting, this oppressed group is attempting to further oppress those, and the way that they do it is that they try to emulate, right? They try to emulate the practices of the oppressor, and he calls this technically adhesion. Adhesion is the technical term Freire gives for this emulation, right? This emulation of the oppressor group by a sub-oppressor is the act of adhesion. And adhesion is the perceived necessity of oppression as a condition for recognition, is the way that I worded it, right? And I think that's the clearest way to say it, right? Adhesion, this process of adhesion, is the perceived necessity of oppression as a condition for recognition. So in contemporary American sort of black Africana liberation theory, this would be the establishment of the Jim Crow laws, right? Jim Crow laws were set up specifically to give credibility to fair-skinned African Americans and sort of charge them with dominating darker-skinned African Americans, both of which were oppressed. But in a sense, there's this false belief that fair-skinned African Americans are less oppressed, right? But there is no moderation, right? There is no gradient in oppression. If you are oppressed, you are oppressed. You're not less oppressed than anybody else. You're just oppressed, right? So this idea of adhesion, which is a technical term that Freire uses, is the conduit with which sub-oppressors justify the oppression of members of their own group, really, of other oppressed people. At this level, there is no recognition of oppression. There's just a submersion, right? It's just, all I understand is within the context of oppression. There is no recognition of oppression. There is the adhesion to the oppressed group, right? The attempt to try and emulate the practices of the oppressed group. And then lastly, no struggle to overcome oppression, rather a total immersion in oppression, right? So this first level of liberation, there's only oppression. There isn't even a recognition of one's oppression. It's just total submersion, total saturation with oppression. I don't recognize that I'm oppressed at this first level as an oppressed group member. All I try to do through the process of adhesion is to do what is done to me, right? I'm being oppressed, but I don't recognize that. I just think that that's the way that I gain recognition. So the way that I gain recognition is to suppress and oppress those beneath me. And that's the process at this level. So the only thing we have at the first level of liberation is oppression. Right? The only thing that exists at this level is oppression. And that's Freire's account. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch my video. I know it's been very detailed, and it's going to get even more detailed, but hopefully by the end of this series, you'll have a good understanding of Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed. You'll have a good understanding of the dynamic relationship between the oppressor and the oppressed group, and also an understanding of the struggle and the liberation inherent in overcoming one's oppression. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time for the continuation of this series. With that, I'm Dr. Jason J. Campbell. Thanks for watching my video. Have a good day.